Hey guys, Matthew LaCroix here, sitting down with Billy Carson live in the Gaiosphere to discuss the new season of Ancient Civilizations, his upcoming speaking presentation at the Ancient Civilizations Conference on Saturday, as well as all of these ancient mysteries around the world and esoteric secrets. And Billy, it's great to sit down and talk to you, my friend. How you doing?
Great, fantastic, man. Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Always. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We've been working together for a number of years. Great collaborations. We'll have our upcoming book we wrote together, The Epic of Humanity, releasing this November.
Yes, it's amazing. I really like the fact that we're doing this whole thing on ancient civilizations because it really kind of goes along with the book.
It really, really does. And for me, I'm very proud to be able to not only work on writing and being part of the team that put together Ancient Civilizations, but to be in it along with you. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the new season of Ancient Civilizations and what makes that, what separates that, and some of the exciting aspects that brings to the table.
Well, this new season of Ancient Civilizations that's coming now is going to be so dynamic and so incredible because it's really a fact-based driven series. We're going to go into all the megalith and monoliths from all around the world. We're going to be utilizing ancient texts and talking about the actual people that lived in those civilizations, pre-Diluvian, antediluvian people. We're talking about all the records that they've handed down through verbal histories and written histories, as well as all their accomplishments. And so a lot of it really is allowing us to go back to where they started from, how they got there, and their interaction with one another globally.
Yeah, and really what we see when we look at the telltale evidence left behind around the world, whether or not it's Japan or Machu Picchu or Tiwanaku or Egypt, Easter Island, which are some of the episodes of this upcoming season, we find these telltale remnants left behind from these civilizations that seem to have been connected around the world by shared knowledge and shared information. Do you think that we're at a tipping point for where we're going to, when we bring evidence like this to the masses, we keep saying, look, there's these holes in this narrative that we're taught. There's the evidence is overwhelming. Is this narrative and doctrine going to change in our lifetime?
I really think that in our lifetime we can see a massive shift in the understanding of the true history of mankind on this planet, especially with shows like Ancient Civilizations. One of the things that this show is going to do is going to enlighten people and fill in the gaps in between where mainstream history has given us a certain track record or information to learn from. But there's been a lot of gaps along the way, and what we're doing is actually filling in those gaps with information that's as close to the truth of what really happened as possible.
Exactly. And so one of the things that captivates me and fascinates me so much about this new season, as well as looking at the content that goes into that, is that we seem to find this moment in time, likely, and I'll get your opinion on, during this Younger Dryas period and potentially earlier, where we have these events across the planet that seem to have wiped out this entire chapter of our past and made us start over again. Do you think that something like that will happen again? And is it something that that there's anything left over from that civilization before?
Well, it's a great question. You have the Younger Dryas period, which really, in my opinion, must be some type of a cataclysmic event that created the global flood. And this global flood literally swept across the land. And what's really incredible about it is the evidence of this can be found all over the world. And so, what we're looking at is this going to happen again? Is this part of a natural cycle? If you look at the ice core samples and ice core data, which we talked about in episode number 1 of Ancient Civilizations, you'll find that these warming and cooling periods and these cataclysmic periods are cyclical. They happen all the time. And it seems as if we could be headed towards another one within the next maybe 12 to 20,000 years. However, I believe that with an accurate knowledge of the distant past, an accurate knowledge of what happened in the ancient past, and now with us waking up, becoming technologically savvy once again, rising back up from the ashes like a phoenix, and then combining that with awakening and spirituality, and combining those two things together, we could have the spiritual knowledge and the technological knowledge to actually avert another global catastrophe and maintain a golden age.
And it doesn't just come down to our ability to have technology today, though. What can we learn from those civilizations that we've forgotten today?
Well, one thing we can learn is if you look at them during their golden age eras, they learned how to live in unity, peace, happiness, and harmony with one another. They learned how to utilize their technological advantage and the spiritual advantage to free the bondage of the humans on the planet and sustain a life where people were able to open to explore arts and travel and all these other great things until the collapse would come. The other thing that we can learn is by looking at these ancient sites and these ancient megaliths, we can really learn that they had advanced technology far superior than what we have right now. And they obviously had technology that would literally free the entire planet right now from oil and different types of systems that have been in place to have us grinding and working all the time. Because once you give people power globally and free water and running fresh water, you can then free the planet. So their technologies that they had back then allowed this to happen. And I think if we can tap into that, if we can unlock that, those are mysteries, that we can possibly free the burden of mankind once again on this planet.
And one of the things we find around the world, along with the similarities in the megaliths, where we find the same kind of construction and dynamic and how they built these incredible megalithic structures, we also find the shared knowledge and these stories of these sages and these mystics and these individuals that seem to have traveled around the world and then created those civilizations. Do you think that all of that could be connected to some kind of a source that is related to perhaps like the Anunna or some of these ancient gods of history?
I really do believe that the Anunna or the Anunnaki beings that are talked about in a lot of these ancient texts that can be found all over the world, by the way, they lead to a master architect. One master architect literally handed down this knowledge to mankind, and then that knowledge spread around the planet because they had the capability of going around the planet. They actually were ordered to spread around the planet and duplicate what they had done in the land of Chem before it was called Egypt. And so what we see is remnants of civilizations that had acquired this advanced knowledge, but all from one source. And we can see that we have the pyramids globally, a lot of these megalithic structures globally, all with similar construction techniques. Slightly different motif, but all very similar.
Showing that it all came from a similar source.
It all came from one source. Atlantis, in my opinion, was a global civilization.
Well, that's a great point to bring up for Atlantis. Atlantis seems to be where these civilizations reached the height of their sophistication.
Yeah.
This global civilization that seemed to revolve around the world with centers that, like we hear about with Plato in the Timaeus and Critias, with these circular ring cities.
Right.
Where do you think Atlantis was, and what do you think happened to it?
I think the main capital was the ring city in the Atlantic Ocean. That's my opinion. And that during the time of turmoil, when they got too technologically egotistical, there was a war that broke out, and I believe that in combination with this directed maybe meteor strike, I'm just hypothesizing, caused it to sink. But Atlantis had many capitals on Earth at the same time, running concurrently.
Yeah.
The ring city was probably one of the most well-known and probably the most beautiful, but there was a global civilization operating with different people in control of different regions of the planet at the same time. And as a matter of fact, they all went to war against each other.
Exactly. And so, guys, check out the new season of Ancient Civilization, Season 4 on Gaia, where we go into all these megalithic structures around the world and really discuss the sophistication and the telltale evidence left behind that proves that it's part of a lost story, a chapter of our past that is going to take us to an entire different understanding of consciousness and higher awareness.
Yeah.
So, Billy, I want to talk about this coming weekend. We have the Ancient Civilizations Conference on Gaia, and you're going to be speaking on Saturday.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what you'll be talking about and some of the content that's going to go into that?
I'll be talking about antediluvial Atlantis. So I'll be talking about the advanced civilization that existed in a golden age period prior to the Great Flood, which is going to be a great talk. I wish I had 20 hours to talk about it, but I don't. But it's going to be a great talk, and I think people are going to learn a lot from what I have to say.
Well, I can't wait to see it. And that's going to be Saturday at what time?
I believe at 3 p.m. to 4:15 p.m. Mountain Time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, make sure you would tune into that. Billy's going to be here. Of course, we're in the Gaia sphere now, but you're going to be doing an entire presentation here, discussing Atlantis and some of the secrets left behind from that, which is an absolutely fascinating topic to discuss. So I'll be also at the conference, and I'm going to be walking around interviewing and talking to people. Cool. So this is going to be a really cool event. So I'm excited to be part of this.
Nice, interactive. I like it.
Yeah, so make sure you join this weekend and be part of this incredible event, because we're really going to be getting into some really incredible stuff. So I just want to mention also, you and I have gone way back in some of the work we've done.
Right.
What do you think works well with our collaborations and the way that we study these ancient texts, and because we're trying to do something important here.
Yeah, I know. Well, I remember back when Gerald Clark got us together in the Anunnaki series years ago, and that's how I first met you. And I was really intrigued by your ability to digest and discern these ancient tablets.
Thank you.
And so that's when I said, I got to really latch on with this guy, because this guy is one of the very few people that's doing what I'm doing, like really reading these things. A lot of people weren't reading the tablets. They were just claiming they did, or just assuming from other people's videos, but not really doing the hard research. And when I recognized that you were really doing the hard research, I said, wow, this guy really has something special. He's a special talent. And that's when I wanted to, link up with you. And since then, we've worked on many podcasts and projects together. I traveled out to Maine a couple of years ago, to meet up with you and to have a talk, just a powwow. And during that meeting, we actually, even came up with the idea to do the book, The Epic of Humanity. And since then, we've been, working together quite a bit on several different projects, just trying to bring this knowledge of ancient civilizations to the world.
Yeah, I'm incredibly excited, and I really appreciate all the time we've had a chance to work together, and we're going to do a lot more in the future. We have a lot of plans coming up.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, guys, the release of the Epic of Humanity this November, and it's going to be a time capsule of ancient knowledge and recreating the story of the past.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for more on that. And I think we have some questions that have come in. Yeah. We can talk about some of those.
So someone asked, how many civilizations existed before us?
Oh, wow.
Go ahead and take that one, Billy.
We're talking about a lot of civilizations. Now, one main civilization that definitely existed is the Atlantean civilization. If you look at the Vedas, we have that civilization as well. But that Veda civilization was also, I think, part of the Atlantean civilization. So there were, according to the Mayans, there's been 4 worlds, and we're heading into the 5th. So there's been many times that civilizations have risen and fallen on this planet and have reached a very high level. And now we're heading into the 5th, coming into this age of Aquarius, which will be really, I think, in 2025 is when it officially starts. And that's why you see this mass awakening happening on the planet right now. So we're actually getting ready to evolve and shift in our current civilization into a more higher frequency right now.
Yeah, and what we really find is that the civilizations were actually more advanced in some ways in the past than they are now.
Yeah.
And we go back more than 12,000 years ago, we find that telltale evidence around the world that they knew things and had connections to understandings that we just don't have anymore today.
Right.
This concept of creating temples and pyramids around the world for creating higher states of energy and consciousness, and their connection to the cosmos, and the Hermetic law of as above, so below, where they would mimic the stars and have this energy on Earth.
Yeah.
Look at us today.
Yeah.
We just build something somewhere because it makes sense, but it's not based on the stars or consciousness.
Right.
And we live in these largely concrete jungles at times, and we completely disconnected to the stars any longer. We no longer can see them because of light pollution in most cases.
Yeah.
And so, I often walk around and I observe what we've become, and we do seem quite lost compared to what we used to be back in the past, but we're going to return to that in the future, don't you think?
We absolutely are. The further back you go in time, the more incredible the structures are. The further closer you come to a current era, the more poorly we're constructing. But now with this knowledge that's being released through shows like Ancient Civilizations and all the work that we've done, the books and everything else, it's going to create this, it's already creating this mass awareness on the planet. And once people start to realize what really happened in the ancient past and how we really existed and the true power that's inside of us, that's going to give us the power to move forward into a much better future.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Do you have any more questions,
Yeah,
Mike?
we've got another one. So someone asked, your guys' research, is it compatible with what Matthias de Stefano talks about in terms of history of mankind, in terms of Lemuria and Atlantis, and his take?
Who can answer that one?
Okay, so Matthias has this whole remembrance aspect of what he looks into, these past lives aspect of living in those civilizations during that time. And I certainly believe, and I think Billy does too, where you study quantum physics and you look at consciousness and energy, that all the ancient civilizations talked about how incarnation was very much a part of what this existence is, where we would live different lifetimes and learn different lessons, but we would bring things with us. And some of those things we would bring would be little fragments of memories from those times before, and some people are more in tune to those than others, and I think there is some viability in the idea of that. But do you get any sense that maybe you were alive during another civilization long ago, or have you ever had that feeling or that understanding that you've been here before?
That's one of the things I felt and talked about, not publicly yet. You had to put me on the spot. I probably talked about this before, and I do believe that there's a remembrance of a past lifetime, and there could be potential past lifetimes. I believe that there could be a person that could be 6 years old, that could be a newborn baby in terms of spirituality, existence, and a person that could be 20 that could be ancient, and even your mother could be younger than you, spiritually, in terms of incarnations, and that many of us have come back many times, not only just in this on this planet, but maybe even on other planets, and even as maybe even other species, maybe even other genders. Incarnation is such an incredible thing because energy moves and flows throughout the entire universe, and you never know where or how it's going to connect and recoalesce in the third dimension.
So do you see Earth as being like a teaching school for us to come back over and over again and learn certain lessons?
I believe Earth is definitely a teaching school. It's a proving ground for spirituality. I think that the mass consciousness that exists is only one. It utilizes Earth as a way to experience the third dimension through billions of people for the purpose of collecting data and understanding what is it like to be in the third dimension.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Do any more questions, Mike?
Yeah. What's the most substantial piece of evidence that mainstream archaeology refuses to accept when it comes to talking about antediluvian civilizations?
Well, they refuse to accept the timelines. Number one, the timelines are so massive, and just looking at the Sphinx, for example, it's at least 38,000 years old, in my opinion. At least 38,000, could be even older. The Great Pyramid could be even older. We're talking about timelines that go so far back it would blow anybody's thesis on their college exam. And so basically, they don't want to bend to these timelines because they feel that if they bend to these timelines, it will break down the entire paradigm of the teachings that have been put forward for the last couple hundred years or whatever it's been, and they don't want that to happen. But the timelines are very, very important to understand. Even like with the Sumerian texts, a lot of those tablets have been rewritten on new tablets, which are still old. But prior to that, sometimes they were handed down verbally before they got written back onto a tablet. We're talking about thousands and thousands, maybe tens of thousands of years of ancient history that's been handed down over and over again. Even the Aboriginals in Australia have handed down their verbal history, saying that they were seeded on this planet by Pleiadians. And that's their verbal handed down history for thousands of years.
Yeah, and I think what we're also finding is that when we look around the world at places like throughout the megaliths, we find in Turkey, Egypt, Peru, Bolivia, Japan, what we find is these gigantic blocks that are created largely out of granite, these very hard materials that the fact is would have been impossible to create with Bronze Age tools.
Yeah.
There's where the problem lies right there. Because if we're talking about a civilization, our civilization that only goes back, according to mainstream historians, only 6,000 years, then we're talking about this slow linear growth in their course, according to their academic records, where they had reached the height was Bronze Age tools.
Yeah.
Now we need to get into looking at the Mohs hardness scale and understanding that Bronze Age tools would be impossible to create these structures.
Yeah.
Simple as that. It's not as if they could have somehow manipulated to make those. They simply couldn't.
Right.
So it opens up more questions when we start looking at star alignments, things like the Great Pyramid of Giza, and like you mentioned, the Great Sphinx and how it aligns to Leo. We look back and we say, well, when did that align? It didn't align 5,000 years ago.
No.
And the earliest we can find those alignments was around 12,000 years ago. But because of the catastrophes of the Younger Dryas, because of how much was going on, and from the salt residue we find throughout Giza, the Sphinx, the Great Pyramids, and other temples, it shows that those areas were flooded by oceans.
Yep.
And then eventually oceans receded, leaving that behind. I believe that event was the Younger Dryas catastrophes, but that means that those structures were built before that.
Yes.
Which, when we get into Zep Tepi, the second episode of Ancient Civilization Season 4, we discuss how Zep Tepi is this concept in Egypt where it's written about how there was this beginning of when Egypt started, when all of those things were created. And the more we look at those alignments, like John Anthony West's work, with these star alignments and the environments that were available to be able to create those structures, we find dates more like 38,000 years ago.
Right.
We're talking about a timeline that would completely shatter what we're taught. But I think largely what's even more important than that is that, okay, let's say they were to adopt that timeline and adjust human history.
Right.
The problem is when they would go back and look at those civilizations that existed, they would find in some ways they were more sophisticated than we were. They had concepts of connection to the cosmos with star alignments here on Earth, energy ley lines around the planet, how to reach higher states of consciousness. And the problem we would find is that this model we're taught would collapse, because those civilizations all of a sudden would be completely more advanced in certain ways than we are, and it would redefine what the human experience is.
Yes,
It would redefine who we are, where we came from, how our connection is to the universe and the cosmos, and it truly would change this entire paradigm. It would shatter, wouldn't it?
It would shatter. It would be gone. The whole paradigm would completely shift, and political systems and religious systems might collapse because of it.
It really would. It would redefine everything in our reality.
Yeah.
I think that's why it's being tightly controlled. But that's something that we're working to take down and redefine, aren't we?
That's right. Every single day.
Cool. We've got time for one more question, and this is a good segue. Someone was asking, Billy, you mentioned the Pleiadians and the Aboriginal connection to the Pleiadians. What's the difference or connection between the Pleiadians and the Anunnaki?
Well, that's a great question. And the Anunnaki, in my opinion, is a generalized term to cover any being that comes from space to Earth. And so I don't think that the Anunnaki is one particular race. I think it's a multi-race of people from different star systems. If you look at humans, for example, if we travel to Mars and then we meet a Martian and the Martian goes, "Where are you from?" We're going to say, I'm not going to say I'm a Pleiadian. I'm going to say I'm an Earthling. Right? And so I think that Anunnaki is a generalized term, and what it's doing is saying anybody who comes from heaven to Earth, no matter where they came from. And I believe that with that definition, Pleiadians would be some of the Anunnaki as well.
Yeah, and it seems like we find these connections to star systems all above us. You know,
Yeah.
the Great Pyramid aligning with the King and Queen's Chamber to the Orion constellation in Sirius, as well as this really focus on like the Pleiadian star system in the Sumerian Tablets, which we find depictions of that very, very frequently.
Yeah.
You know, what is going on here? In one of the ancient tablets, it shows Enki passing the plow, and it shows a star system behind him, and him passing the plow to civilization. To me, what that depicts is he's basically bringing the technology and knowledge of creating civilization through agriculture to humanity,
Right.
from somewhere else, from a star system, from somewhere else,
Yeah.
to create these civilizations here. And that's exactly what the tablets talk about, isn't it?
It is. And I've collected a lot of artifacts over the years, and I would say 70% of them have a depiction of the Pleiades star system on them, and a lot of them are Sumerian.
So I really encourage people to check out cylinder seals like VA243 and check that out for yourself, to see it, because it really points towards the idea that everything we have here and everything that led to our rise in civilization, it came from somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it was brought here, and those connections were lost, which is why it took so long for us to get back to this point now,
Right.
for when those civilizations were destroyed. Well, Billy Carson, I want to just say thank you so much for sitting down to talk to me today.
Thank you, man.
I truly appreciate working with you,
Yeah,
and
same here.
looking forward to your talk at the Ancient Civilizations Conference on Saturday.
Great.
And everyone, make sure you check out Ancient Civilizations Season 4 on Gaia to hear much more about this discussion and some of the details on these megalithic civilizations in the Younger Dryas. And until next time, thanks so much, Billy.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man.